This is Tokens. I'm Lacey Camp. At 3:20 in the morning on August 7, 2019, Cyntoia Brown was released from the Tennessee Prison for Women. She had been sentenced to 51 years without parole for the murder of a man to whom she had been sex trafficked. Be advised, her story is graphic, and we encourage listener discretion.
So, that night started, I was there in the hotel room, and when I woke up, I went out, and I started walking towards the Sonic, which was right next door. And this man comes in this white Ford F-150, and he asked if I wanted a ride. We went back to his house, and the whole time I just wanted to get out of there. He started showing off his guns to me, but I felt like I couldn't just walk out the front door. So I shot him.
This episode was taped in front of a live audience at Northwind Manor, beautiful home base for our friends at the Rabbit Room. Coming up, we'll hear from Cyntoia about her experience as a victim of sex trafficking, her stints in juvenile detention, her life in prison, and the coming to faith and hope which ultimately led to her release and current work to combat the issues to which she herself fell victim. All this in just a moment. Welcome, Cyntoia.
Thank you.
Delightful to have you here tonight.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So I like that your first meal out of prison was ravioli.
Ravioli.
Yeah.
Chef Boyardee.
Why Chef Boyardee ravioli? How did that come to pass?
I think when you've been away for things for so long, you kind of forget, they're not as good as you probably think in your memory. But I just remember when I was a kid, I loved it. And so I was like, man, I want some ravioli. That's what I want. My husband was like, are you sure? I was like, yeah.
Other surprises just about daily life since you were in prison for 15 years from the time you were 16? I would imagine things had changed a bit since you got out.
Yes, everything has changed.
Yeah.
A lot of surprises, just random things that you would probably never think twice about. I think it's amazing that you could just tap your phone on something and then pay for something. That just blows my mind. I know the toilets I was telling you backstage about when I came home, I was freaking out. I was like, oh, Jamie, we've got fancy toilets because we've got the buttons on the top. And he was like, babe, every toilet is like that now. I was like, oh, okay. So just everything that's changed is different. And every single day there's something new that just blows my mind.
Yeah. One of the things I was repeatedly impressed upon me as I read your book was the degree of vulnerability that you exhibited in the writing of this book and your courage in doing that. And to start tonight, I just wanted to thank you and honor the fact that not only in the writing of the book, but in doing something like this, that you're exhibiting an immense amount of courage, and that I wanted to honor and let you know explicitly. I really appreciate that. And
thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. As an elementary school student, you were identified as gifted, and you were put in the academically superior students program in your elementary school. I think maybe second grade, perhaps. And yet, during those same years, beginning to struggle with a sense of belonging.
Right.
And you talk about how this story of being in a production of Tom Sawyer and the Whitewashed Fence, and you're curtsying to the applause at the end, and you hear a boy say something that seemed to be a very significant moment for you. So what do you remember in that moment?
So in that moment, I was already struggling, like you said, with feeling like I didn't belong with my identity. In kindergarten, I found out that I was mixed. I didn't really know what that meant. And not only that I was mixed, but that I was adopted. Back in that time, you didn't see a lot of kids that were, biracial. You were black or you were white. That was pretty much it where I grew up. So I struggled with that for many years. And then at this play, one of the kids had said, look at that dirty white girl. And it was like, wow, here I am. I'm feeling proud of myself going through this play. And once again, I'm running into that. So that was difficult. And so it's you know what? You don't want to be my friends? I don't want you. I don't want you as friends. As a matter of fact, I don't want any friends. I don't need friends. I'm fine by myself. And so I just really just started to push other kids away, and I felt like more safe that way, like being to myself. But really, it was just I was angry at everything. And then, I would start to have more of an attitude with other kids and with the teachers. And obviously that brought on even more problems and even more labels.
More problems, more labels. What does some of that begin to look like for you?
So in the classroom, when I told my teacher that I didn't want to work in groups, that was me having a bad attitude. That was me not wanting to work on a team. But really, it was me not feeling like I belonged there, not feeling that, I was comfortable in that setting because the kids didn't treat me like I was one of their peers. In class, when I didn't necessarily want help from the teacher, then, that was an issue. Again, I was one of the bad kids, and I just didn't want to do what I was supposed to do. When I finally did want to participate, if I spoke out an answer, then I was disruptive because I didn't raise my hand. So I felt like there was always something. And, any little thing that I did resulted in me getting punished or me getting sent to the principal's office. It was just an excuse to really just push me further and further away from the classroom.
Then in time, you began to get crossways with the juvenile system. What does that begin to look like for you?
So it started out, again, so many trips, getting sent to the principal's office for all these little things. Then there was one incident where I actually brought something called No-Dose to class, which is a caffeine pill. You can get it at Walmart. But I had brought it for show and tell, and it was treated as drugs. So I got kicked out of school under the no tolerance policy for having drugs. And because I was kicked out of public school, I had to go to an alternative school. And an alternative school is a place where they send kids who've been kicked out, kids who are on probation, kids who have gone to facilities, juvenile detention facilities, kids who are in state custody. And being in that environment, I started skipping school with them, started doing the things that they were doing. And I found myself in a courtroom being sent to juvenile detention when I was just 12 years old.
So you get sent to juvenile detention at 12? And then you're kind of in and out of several facilities, right? Mm-hmm. As you look back on those 2-3 years, what strikes you about, what stands out to you as, I don't know, as I read the book, I just thought the system seems so broken. And even when you have good people working in a broken system, the system can just have so much power over people caught up in that system. But as you look back, is that fair to say that the system seems broken, or what?
I think it's more than fair to say.
Yeah. I mean, what are some particulars of that in your experience?
First and foremost, I should have never been in state custody going to all of those facilities. When I went before the judge the first time, there was never even a question asked. I never got the opportunity to talk about what had happened before they had decided to send me to a facility for evaluation. And when I went to court, because I didn't have someone to pick me up and take me home, my father, he was a truck driver, he was away. My mother couldn't leave school right then because she was a teacher. They put me in state custody. And that's why I had to go to all those facilities. That should have never happened. When you're in custody, you have a case manager. Ideally, this person should be connecting you with resources in the community, trying to find ways to help you be successful. That's not what they do. They have basically this spreadsheet that they look at to see where you fall under their different classifications to determine where they want to place you, where they're going to put you. If it's a problem with you going there, they'll just find you somewhere else. It's basically them just warehousing you. So that's a start. They don't really listen. They don't really listen to what it is that you're going through. They're not really trying to help you. They're just trying to do whatever is in the policy that they have to do for you while you're in their care.
Yeah, and I, as you tell the stories there, I watch the ways in which that you would get angry, and I would think, and as I'm reading, I'm thinking I'd be ticked to be put in that situation, and as a 13 or 14-year-old is going to do anyway, right? You find yourself acting out of anger in various ways, and then the consequences just keep ramping up. As a kind of like a no-win sort of situation. It seemed like as the situation unfolded.
Right.
Then it gets even heavier and darker with, at one point, you decide to run away from one of the facilities, right?
So, not just the problems with the actual people who work there at the facilities, who work there for DCS, but being there with the other kids is rough. You have a lot of kids in this situation. We're all dealing with this anger. We're all in this situation, and, we're kind of taking it out on each other every single day. You're having to fight somebody in addition to fighting with the staff there, trying to figure out, like just how to make it day to day. Finding some peace is pretty much impossible. So I just wanted to run away. I wanted to leave the facility. And the opportunity came about, and I did. I left and I started staying on the streets here in Nashville and got in touch with some people who were much older than me that did not treat me as a 13-year-old girl.
Things continue to kind of begin to devolve pretty quickly into much darker, much more difficult season of your life.
Well, if you can imagine, being a kid on the streets, everyone who's out here, you don't have your parents taking care of you. You have to survive somehow. If you can't go get a job, if you can't get any kind of assistance from the government, what are you going to do? You're going to do whatever you can, whatever opportunities are placed before you. At that time, it was, stealing as part of a small boosting ring. It was meeting up with different guys. The women that I was staying with, they taught me how to have conversations with different men, how to go on dates with men and get money from them. And, in my mind, I was being taught that this is how relationships work.
And you're like 14 or 15 at this time?
Yes.
Yeah.
By the time that I was 16, it was so ingrained in my mind that this was normal. When a man came along that was older than me, I looked at him like he was my boyfriend. I thought we were in a relationship. I didn't think of it as trafficking, but that's exactly what it was.
Yeah. Again, with any of these questions, you feel free to, we can move on. But I think you're so vulnerable in telling some of the stories. And I think what happens in listening to your narrative is the tragedy and the drama that you're having to deal with as a very young person. But you tell this story that's shocking. Once I got to the kind of the end of the story, I was just shocked about this fellow who takes you and for a couple of days. And
yes.
Are you okay telling that story?
Oh, I am.
Yeah.
That was actually the man that I was selling drugs for, and he had called me over. He came to pick me up. He called me up to pick me up to take me out of town with him to go pick up some drugs, or at least that's what he told me. And instead, he took me to a hotel room out on West End, said that he had to get some things before we got to the bus station, told me to come on in. It would just be a few minutes, asked me if I wanted something to drink. He poured me a drink. I had that drink, and I didn't remember much of the next few days. There were just flashes in my mind, and at some point, I kind of just came to and realized what was happening, and it turns out that was 3 days later. And he had kept me there and had raped me repeatedly in that room for 3 days.
So then you meet the young man that you mentioned a moment ago. His name's Cut.
Yes, short for Cutthroat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you describe it as a sort of genuine falling in love, as a teenage falling in love, right?
Yeah.
As you look back on kind of falling in love with him, what was it about him that you think prompted this falling in love?
Well, one of the things is, all throughout my life, I had never felt like I was seen. I had never felt like I was heard. I never felt like I mattered. And that was constantly being reinforced by the school, by my peers, by the court systems, by the people in the facilities. And here was this man who, when we were together, I could go on and on talking about everything that I wanted to. I can talk all about myself, and he seemed so interested in knowing everything about me, knowing everything that I liked, everything I didn't like, my dreams, my goals. And I had never had that. And I took that as him caring about me. Really, he was learning how to manipulate me, but I wouldn't realize that until much later. But it felt like the love that I had always wanted. And pretty soon, after a few days, we were staying together in a hotel all the time. And I thought it was just because he was that into me and he loved me that much. And
then with that relationship, you recount that the pictures I have in my mind from your book, rather quickly you've got guns involved with him waving guns around 40 caliber around in your face a lot, increasing levels of verbal abuse, and even a no clothes policy.
Yes.
Which was, I suppose, I mean, I made up as I read, this was yet again a kind of another form of control, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
This was, like I said in the beginning, of course, he was sweet, he was kind, he was everything. And, I felt like this was the love that I'd always wanted. And so when it started with these conversations where he just started telling me things about myself that he didn't like about me, I felt like I had done something wrong, or there was something with me that I needed to fix. Those turned into lectures. And those lectures started, just him pacing around the room telling me what a horrible person that I was, and, how no one would ever want me, but he wanted me because he likes people that other people may not necessarily want. So that's okay. Then telling me what I needed to do, how I needed to go out and get money for the two of us. Then he started waving the gun around. But it was kind of just a gradual kind of thing. But through the whole process, I felt like it was something because that I had done something wrong. Mm. And if I went out and I made enough money or I did well enough, then I could get us back on the right track.
Yeah.
And we could get back to the place where we were so in love in the beginning. But
yeah. August 6, 2004. You go out, you and Cut have had this difficult exchange, the difficult moment. Again, the expectation that you provide somehow financially.
Mm-hmm. And I was being lazy, he said.
Yeah. So you go out across the street from the Sonic, or close to the Sonic, and you get picked up. You say in the book, everything that happened at his house plays in my memory like a movie out of order.
That night started, I was there in the hotel room again with no clothes because I wasn't allowed to wear clothes. And we had been at the hotel for a few days. And, he said I was getting lazy because I hadn't went out and got any money for the past few days, which, just as a side note, I had never thought that this was going to be something that I had to constantly do. He told me in the beginning that if I could get enough money, that he could actually take that and invest it, and he would use it, to sell drugs. We'd live this perfect life, happily ever after. And in my mind at that time, I thought that was ideal. Like, okay, I can do this a few times. So here he was telling me that I had been getting lazy and I needed to go out and I needed to get money so we could get another hotel room for the week. So that night we had got into it and he had choked me. And when I woke up, I went out and I started walking towards the Sonic, which was right next door. And this man comes in this white Ford F-150 and he asked if I wanted a ride. And, at first I told him yes, because I was going to head out to East Nashville. And when I got in the car, he asked, was I hungry? I said, yes, I'm hungry. And I remember when I was walking to that point, it was another one of those times where I was just done. Like, I was just at my bottom. It's like, I'm so sick of this. I didn't feel like this was what I had signed up for. Like, I'm done. And I decided to take a chance. Like, maybe this nice white man will actually help me. He's, asking me if I'm hungry, things like that. Let me just tell him what I'm going through. And I told him that I was up here from the summer from school. And I was staying with this man in this hotel room that's constantly fighting on me, constantly making me go out and sell my body. And I was crying when he had met me. So I'm thinking maybe he's going to help me. But instead, he just looks at me and he says, so are you up for any action? And I remember that moment, I just felt like, is this it? Like, this is what it is? This is my life? Like, this is all there is. So I told him, yeah, sure. Of course, he haggled me over the price. We went back to his house after he stopped at the ATM to get the money. There was a small moment that he actually talked about Christ to me, which, I often think about, because he said that he was a Sunday school teacher. But there was nothing about that interaction that felt Christ-like. Nothing about it. And the whole time I just wanted to get out of there. He started showing off his guns to me, but I felt like I couldn't just walk out the front door. There was never any kind of like outward threats, but you kind of just felt it. You felt like, this is not a safe situation. This is not a safe person. But I kept trying for, I think maybe 2 hours. I was in that house with him, trying to figure out a way to sneak out of there, trying to get out of there. Wasn't able to. So I felt, well, maybe if I ask him if I could rest for a few minutes, if I could just get a little bit of sleep, he'll fall asleep. He'd already been drinking, and I could just sneak out. So that's what I tried to do, but obviously it didn't work. There was one point when I felt that he had turned over and was reaching for something, so I shot him with the gun that Cut had given me. And after that, I went back to Cut.
What were those next couple hours like?
It was crazy. I don't think I processed in my mind like what had really happened. I remember like when I was leaving out of the house, I felt like for some reason he was asleep because I could hear the sounds that his body was making, which is like, that's just what happens. It sounded like snoring, and it was like, so did he just fall asleep? Like, I just shot that gun and he just fell asleep? And I left, and I was thinking, I don't know what happened. I said, I think I hurt someone when I went back to the hotel room with Cut. And he was like, what do you mean? I said, I think I just shot somebody. I think I just killed somebody. And, he told me to wipe the truck down, and he told me to take it to the Walmart parking lot and park it. And so that's what I did. And I kept on like that entire night. I didn't even hardly sleep. And I was like, is this person okay? Like, what just happened? Like, what really just happened right now? So I would watch the TV, the news, to see if anything happened, if there was any reports. Like, am I tripping? Like, what's really going on?
In time, you're arrested. You're time of a hearing, and there's a picture of you in an orange jumpsuit, 2 pigtails, and that's your hearing, I think, where they're deciding whether to try you as an adult, mm-hmm. right? What's going through your mind at that point of, and the consequences, obviously, of being tried as an adult, as a 16-year-old? What's kind of going through your mind? What are you thinking? What are you experiencing during that time?
That was, well, first of all, when I was first arrested, I really didn't understand. Like, again, I didn't understand the gravity of the situation. I really didn't. When the detectives had picked me up and they told me, if you talk to us, it'll be the difference between 9 years and 99 years. Just tell us what happened. And, my father, he raised me. He was in the military. He always talked to me about self-defense. And I felt like what I had done was justified. And I didn't have any problem talking to the officers about it. I said, sure, I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you everything that happened. But then when I met with my attorneys and she explained to me that I could be tried as an adult, which would mean I would get life in prison, which is 51 years in the state of Tennessee, it's like somebody just snatched the earth from underneath me. I couldn't believe it. There was a 2-month waiting period before I actually had that hearing. And at the hearing where you saw me with the orange jumpsuit and the pigtails, that's when I had the chance to really talk to the judge and tell everything that happened. And I thought it went well. I thought, surely the hearing went well. I've been praying every single day. I remember reading that if I pray, anything I ask is going to be given to me. So this is not going to happen. I'm not going to be tried as an adult. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life in prison. But 2 weeks go by after the hearing, and I was given the news that, I was being transferred and I was going to be tried as an adult.
5-day trial, I think it was.
I think so.
Yeah. What are memories of the trial for you?
Oh, stressful, horrible outfits, because obviously I couldn't pick out my clothes. It was really horrible. I remember the first day that we had trial, like it really just hit me like how overwhelming it was. And so I was sitting there during jury selection, and I was like crying because I was thinking these people are going to decide my fate, and I may do life in prison, and they may be the ones to put me there. And the DA in my case was just, I don't know what his deal was, but like from the very beginning, like he just had this disdain for me. And it was almost like personal, like not like what a DA, like I understand a DA is not supposed to be your friend. A DA is not supposed to want to set you free. Like I get that. But there was something else, like something underlying that. And so during the break for that first day, I know my attorney had taken me back and she said that, he was saying things about, oh, she's crying now. Don't cry now. And I was like, okay, I won't cry anymore. You won't see another tear fall from my eye. And from that moment like that, I just sat there stone-faced through the whole 5 days as, they were debating everything. They were saying all these things that they just knew happened. And, inside I'm screaming like, that's not what happened. Like, you weren't there. Like, that's not how that happened. But it's like, you can't say anything. Like, you don't have a voice in that moment. You told your attorney everything, but like, they're not defending you the way that you would defend yourself. Obviously, there's reason for that. In the courtroom, you have decorum and things like that. But like, it's just in that moment, you don't feel that. You're like, help me, like, tell them what really happened. So it was really hard to sit through all of that. And then to finally have them come back through and, not look you in your face because they did find you guilty. They announce you're guilty and you're sentenced to 51 years in prison. Yeah. On the spot, I was sentenced. I don't even know. It was so quick that it happened, but it felt like hours that I was sitting there. We stood up as the jury came in, and I felt like I knew in that moment when they didn't look at me. And there was one guy, the one black guy, he kind of like just looked off and just shook his head. And I was like, they found me guilty. I knew in that moment. And so then whenever they went through, they announced it and everything, and everyone got pulled. The jury got pulled, and like it was just final. We were told to stand up for them to leave out. Obviously, I did not stand up for those people. Then the judge, he said, you're sentenced to life in prison right there on the spot. We're going to take a break for intermission. Before we do, I want to thank you again for your sharing and your honesty and vulnerability. Let's give a little thanks for Cyntoia, and then we'll be back. You're listening to Tokens, Public Theology, Human Flourishing, and the Good Life, and we are most grateful to have you joining us. If you've not yet done so, subscribe today to the Tokens podcast on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. We do love hearing from you and are always pleased to hear some of the things you'd like to hear more about. You can email us at podcast@tokenshow.com. Also, remember, you can sign up for our email list or find out how to join us for a live event here in Nashville, all at tokenshow.com. And we do hope you'll come see us here in Nashville. This is our interview with Cyntoia Brown Long. Coming up, we'll continue to hear her tell stories, heartbreaking and hopeful, of her time in prison, her release, her coming to faith, and her efforts to raise awareness and bring help and healing to trafficking victims. Part 2 in just a moment. Welcome back to Tokens and our interview with Cyntoia Brown Long, taped before a live audience. One piece of your storytelling, that another recurring piece that I found so lovely, was in the midst of all the pain, in the midst of the drama and the tragedy, you pointed to episodes of people that were kind. Mm-hmm. In the midst of all that. There was a Miss Diane, there was a Big O and Tim D, there was a Sergeant Henry, and there was your mother, of course. There was another that you mentioned quite a few times who's here tonight, and we welcome Miss Seabrooks. Please welcome Miss Seabrooks. But as you think back, reflecting upon kindness in the midst of all that trauma, any particular pictures or stories that come to mind with us? Definitely Miss Seabrooks. She was the very first person to take a chance on me. She was the first person to give me an opportunity. After so many years of just nothing and being made to feel like I was nothing, she believed in me and she helped me to believe in myself. She gave me a chance to enroll in the Lipscomb program with Dr. Kate and Dr. Good here. And it just completely changed everything. I had been so broken down, like over the years. Like I had literally no self-esteem. And, just these people not just showing me kindness, but, showing me things about myself that I never knew. It really helped me to put those pieces back together and become a person that, I was proud of, that I've never been able to say that I had been proud of myself.
I know before I got to spend some time at Tennessee Prison for Women on a number of occasions, I had no conception of what anything about prison life was like at all, even from an outsider's perspective. But when you go in as a 16-year-old, you're immediately put in solitary confinement because of your age. Mm-hmm. So for 2 years in solitary confinement. But describe what that, just so people can kind of have a sense of what that even means or looks like.
Well, I don't know if any of you have gone into the bathroom since you've been here, but that bathroom in there was bigger than the cell that I was kept in for 23 hours a day. I was kept in that cell, and some days, if they remembered to come let me out, I would come out for an hour a day. That doesn't mean I just got to come out and roam around. It means that they came to my cell, and there was a square in the door, in the metal door, and they would open that flap. They would handcuff me, and then I would go kneel on my bed. They would shackle me, and I got to come out there with handcuffs and shackles. They would transport me to the shower if I wanted to shower, take the shackles off and the handcuffs off while I went in the shower, lock me in there, and then handcuff and shackle me on the way out. So I had to use the phone with handcuffs and shackles. If I just wanted to sit at the table, I was handcuffed and shackled for an hour a day. But other than that, I was kept in a box in a room, and pretty much the only human interaction that I would have was when the guard was bringing me my food tray.
Early on, even though you had kind of intended to make good choices going in, you began to make some bad choices. And you have a chapter entitled Self-Destruction about making a lot of those bad choices early in your prison experience. But at the very end of that chapter, you say, I think it's your closing sentence, I didn't know how close I was to meeting the people who would save my life. And then you go on to talk about some of these mutual friends, Kate Watkins and Richard Good and others who, Richard starting the Lipscomb Life program years ago, and then Kate directing that for a number of years. And I think it'd be nice if we recognize you all here. Thank you all for being here tonight. But then you get invited into that program. So what's that experience like for you? What does that mean to you in your unfolding story?
Well, if you imagine what prison is like all the horrible things that you could possibly imagine, it's all of that, right? It's a very negative place, very dark place. It's a spiritually dark place. And you don't really have a chance to do anything. Like you could sit at the table and play cards and argue with people all day. That's pretty much your only options. If they do provide educational opportunities, it's because people like Ms. Seabrooks has fought to bring them into the prison. And it's because people like Dr. Good and Dr. Kate are fighting to come in. And so they finally were successful. They got to come in, and someone like me who has to live in that environment, that dark environment, finally gets to come. And these people are bringing light, right? And it's just incredible. Like I would look forward to that one night a week where I could feel normal, where I could feel like a human, where I could feel valued, where I could feel worthy, where I could feel like I mattered. And it was just incredible for all of the women that were in that program.
Let me go back to a little bit more question about prison life just a second. Because I think, again, there's a lot of things I suspect a lot of folks may not know. You have a job.
Right.
But your wages are?
If you are lucky, you'll have a job where you can make 50 cents an hour. But other than that, you'll make 17 cents an hour. You'll work your way up to 34 cents an hour, and then you'll top out. After 42 cents, you'll top out at 50 cents. So there's 4 different phases. And then most people, within your first few years, you're going to get a paper in the mail saying that the state of Tennessee is going to take half of that. So about a month, you'll make $10.40 a month that you have to survive off of. If you're making 17 cents, if you're lucky enough to make 50 cents, then you'll live off of $25 a month. And that has to buy your soap, it has to buy your deodorant, it has to buy your lotion, your feminine products, every single thing that you need. And for those of us who do the shopping in the house, you know that does not cut it. So it's really difficult. And sometimes you have to resort to things like doing other people's hair. Like a lot of people resort to doing illegal things, but they're just trying to survive because it's very hard.
Yeah.
So
in time, then you meet esteemed lawyer here in town, Charles Bone.
yes.
And this begins a process of your case coming up for a hearing. And in that case, your childhood kind of experiences began to be examined and the roles they might have played in your experience.
Mm-hmm.
What gets played out in that setting?
So I think I was like 20, 21, 22 when they started looking at the documentary. The first documentary that was filmed about me, it was played on PBS called Me Facing Life. And in that documentary, they had interviewed my biological mother, who said that she drank a fifth of whiskey every single day while she was pregnant with me. So Mr. Bone, who is, a very prominent attorney, he's not a criminal attorney, but he does know some. And so he reached out to some of his friends to look at my case. And one of the things that one of them had said was, I'm pretty sure that affected her negatively. I think we should look further into that. So they hired some experts out of their own pocket for fetal alcohol spectrum disorder and have them evaluate me and do a brain scan. I was actually working for Miss Seabrooks at that time. And they did this brain scan on me, and they came back and they said that I had fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, specifically alcohol-related neurological disorder. And the way that they kind of said it, was really traumatic, because I found that out in a courtroom, in a hearing, with these experts sitting on this panel, calling me mentally retarded. And that just completely devastated me, because everyone who's in here who knows me from Lipscomb knows that I pride myself on, my intelligence, because I've worked hard for it. I study hard, I completely commit myself to it. And that was one of the big building blocks to my self-esteem, where I had put myself back together after being broken down for so long. So to be told that, that was a farce, that, there was something wrong, they literally used the word mildly retarded, I was like, whoa, what? And I remember just going to Miss Seabrook's office, and I just broke down and cried. And she was like, honey, there's nothing wrong with you.
Shortly thereafter, kind of the public narrative around your case begins to change, right? So originally it's teen prostitute commits murder, but then at some point the narrative changes. So can you kind of narrate the way that narrative changes?
Yes. So after the documentary had aired on PBS, I started to get a lot of letters from different people. This was back in 2010, I think. And along with that documentary came some press coverage, just, not anything crazy, but just a bit. And the tone was really changing. So people were looking at my case just a little bit more. When you go through the justice system, they don't really look at things like that. And then if you go back to my trial, I didn't get a chance to talk about certain things. Even during that time, if I was to talk about these things, they didn't consider girls like me trafficking victims. They called me teen prostitute. But, times changed. And so things started to change. The conversations we were having in the community started to change. And that was being reflected in the media reports on me. And
the federal definition of trafficking means necessarily anyone engaged in any way related to sex with minors is trafficking now. Is that
Absolutely.
How that works?
So anyone under the age of 18. If you are soliciting someone under the age of 18, if you are encouraging someone under the age of 18 to have sex in exchange for money, in exchange for goods, you're violating the Trafficking Act.
In a TED Talk that you've done, you've talked about how I think you said maybe 90% of sex trafficking cases is not necessarily enslavement or kidnapping of a person, but is much more related to psychological power and psychological holds over young people. Is that right?
Absolutely. And that's what you're going to see when you go out and you actually talk with the girls in the community who are victims of sex trafficking. They have stories like mine where, no, this is my boyfriend. So a lot of those girls, they get mislabeled. They get called, prostitutes. They get said that, this is something that they're doing all on their own. They're not entitled to services and they're not victims, but they most definitely are.
Throughout the book, you encounter God in various ways, and you recount your experiences with God, by and large being a question of doubt, right? This prayer very early on, don't let me be tried as an adult, but you're tried as an adult. And then you find yourself sentenced to 51 years in prison, and the difficulties and the travails, and so this questioning about God. But you began in time to soften. And I must say, one of the travails of academics and academics who do theology is our rationalism. And so your Memphis stories are wild.
Yes.
So would you share some of those about kind of what begins to open you up to the possibility that God is somehow involved in your story?
Absolutely. So, I first started questioning, after I had spent all that time praying. And I think like the last time that I really just spent time praying is right after I was convicted. And, I just begged God. I said, man, if you let me out of here, I will tell the world about you. I'll do anything. Just please don't let me do life in prison. And then that's really after that point when it started to set in that I was serving a life sentence. It's like I started to be so angry and I was so disappointed. But instead of acknowledging that I was angry and that I felt disappointed, I said I didn't believe in him. So for several years, I went through this, and then I went down to Memphis and I had an experience. I remember that I went down to take a nap, and I started to wake up because I heard someone tell my roommate to wake me up because we were getting puppies there at the prison. And there used to be a dog program at the prison where they trained dogs, but it had been shut down months before, and they weren't coming back. There were going to be no more dogs. But I heard them tell her to wake me up because puppies were coming. And so she came in the room right after I heard that, and she said nothing to me. And I said, Deanna, were you not going to tell me what they said? And she said, no one said anything, Cyntoia. I said, I heard them tell you to wake me up because we were getting puppies. And she said, no, honey, no one said that. You need to go back to sleep. I said, really? So you're just not going to give me the message? And so I got down off my buck. I'm upset because she's not telling me that we're getting puppies. And I go out to the table, and the voices that I heard are sitting there at the table. And I asked them, I said, did you just tell my roommate to wake me up because we're getting puppies today? And they laughed in my face. They said, no, honey, go back to bed. You were dreaming. I said, I was not dreaming. I know I heard you say, wake Centolia up, we're getting puppies. But I went back, I laid down anyway, went back to sleep, and next thing I know, they're waking me up with a puppy. They got puppies. So it freaked me out a little bit, and I was like, whoa, okay. Well, so went to sleep. A few days later, had another dream. This time I had a dream that I saw a dog that was white with black spots, and it had like a knot on its head and a pink spot on its tail. And I was like, well, that's a funny looking dog. No way that's going to come true. But I told them anyway, because I'm like, I need to tell them these dreams ahead of time, or else they'll think I'm lying when I say, oh, I dreamed that. And so I told them, and they was like, well, that's weird. And then a couple days later, sure enough, we got Luke. Luke was a bird dog. He was white with black spots. He had a knot on his head because he's a hound. And then there was a pink spot on his tail from where he would beat it up against the wall in the pound. And so by this point, I was getting really scared. And then I would have more dreams.
What are you going to dream next? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And not, but really like, where is this coming from? What is happening? Because I couldn't explain that away how I would explain to, Dr. Cade and Miss Seabrooks, when Miss Seabrooks told me I would never get out of prison until I came to Jesus. Like, he's going to let me out when I come to him. And I said, well, that's not the way the law works, honey. I've studied. Yeah, trust me. I was like, I'm going to get out when my appeal gets handled and my attorneys are going to get it done. Don't worry. But, I couldn't explain these dreams like that. So I was really struggling. Like, okay, well, I'll say that there's something. I'll admit that there has to be something, but I'm just going to call it this energy. I'm just going to call it the universe. That's what I'll do. Because again, I was angry at God, even though I wasn't admitting that. It was really anger. But that's when I really started to open up and say, okay, I'll admit that it's something. But again, it would take me much more searching, much more work on that area before I actually acknowledged who it really was.
And then you began through this time soon, either before or after that, to fall in love.
Yes.
To Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How does Jamie come into your life?
So I had gone through all my appeals because, again, that's how things were going to work. I was going to win my appeal. Only that's not how it worked. My very last appeal was denied. And I was just sitting there, and now it's finally sinking in that, okay, I may actually do life in prison. So I get this letter at mail call one day, and it really stuck out to me because the edges of the letter were burned. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I read this letter, and this man from Texas is telling me, God wants me to prepare myself because I'm about to get out of prison. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. And he says, people all across the world, he's going to put you on their hearts, and they're going to begin praying for your release. And then at the bottom of it, he signed it, Free Cyntoia, hashtags 2017. I still have the letter. And I wrote him back just because, the edges were burned. Something was telling me to write him back. And then honestly, because he was really freaking cute. Yes. And, he writes me back, and he starts telling me, about his own faith. And it got to the point, where I was so vulnerable with him. Like, I opened up about, my thoughts and what I believed. And, if you ask him now, he was thinking, oh, Lord, what I done got into with this heathen. Because, I would argue with him, but something about his own walk and his own faith. And then he had similar experiences. He had, dreams that were coming true. He had actually had experiences where he heard the voice of God. And he could point me to places in the Bible where that happened. And it's like, well, this is the only explanation. So I had to really force myself to admit it. And he's the one that pointed out to me. He said, it's not that you don't believe, it's that you're angry. Then when he talked to me about Jesus, and I said, yeah, I know. I hear about Jesus every single week at Lipscomb. I'm like, I got it. I get it. I know. He was like, no, but have you read? Like, do you know? And so I actually started reading the gospel for myself instead of what I would hear other people say. So I kind of just tossed that to the side and started getting to know myself. And it's like, wow, like, wait a minute. Like, he is for me. Like, this is my friend. Like, this is someone who loves me. He believes in me, and everything that he stood for. Like, I believe in that. Like, that's what I'm about too. And so Jamie taught me what it was like to actually have a relationship instead of just, going through the whole religion thing where I feel like this is a genie in a bottle. If I pray and ask for certain things, it's going to be given to me. He explained to me the concept of how, my will is not God's will. And, just because I think things should be done in a certain way, that doesn't mean that's how God's going to do them. When I told him that the root of my anger was that I felt like he let me down when I prayed that I not be given life in prison, he said, what makes you think you're doing life in prison? What made you think that? How do you know he's not getting you out? And I said, well, because my last appeal was denied. He said, that's what man said, but God says you're getting out. And he brought it to my attention that the way things were working out once I started that relationship with him was that he was going to free me, but he only did it in a way that I could serve to glorify him through my freedom, and that my freedom would help to free other people. And so, yeah, ever since then, I've just been head over heels in love, not just with my husband, but with God, most importantly.
Through very small odds, end up having a clemency hearing for the parole board.
Yes.
It's a 2-2-2 vote, 2 for you, 2, I think, against you, and 2 saying give you 25 years. Mm-hmm. And then you're waiting for the governor. And then finally, how do you learn that you get clemency?
So I'll tell you, I knew in my heart because, God told my husband to write that letter and said I was getting out. And so for many months, like that, what you just described took place over the course of several months.
And he even moved to Tennessee from Texas,
yes.
not knowing.
Okay, I'll go back.
His knowing that you were going to get out.
Yeah, so I'll go back. So I'll start from when we filed the application, right? So all that stuff happened online with the hashtag. Like I said, this was in November, but my husband had said that in January. Something else that had happened prophetically that was just like, wow, I can't deny this. So all that happened November 2017, but months are going by and there's nothing. There's silence. We filed my application in December and we heard nothing from the governor's office, nothing from the parole board, nothing from the prison, nothing at all. So literally the only voice that was telling us that it was going to get granted was God. And so in February, we got word from our minister that was counseling us, Pastor Tim, and he said, you're going to get a date in March that's, I don't know what the date is, but it's going to put you closer to coming home. It's March and it's going to bring you home. And so every single day in March, we were waiting. We were claiming, okay, yes, we're going to get out. We're going to get a date, something. I don't know if it's a release date or what, but something in March. And on the very last day of March is when we actually got word that we were getting a date for the hearing. And less than 1% of people who file clemency applications in the state of Tennessee ever get a hearing. So that in itself was miraculous. So we have this hearing, and like you said, they voted 2 for me to do 15 years, 2 for me to do 25 years, and 2 of them said they don't feel like I should get out at all. So all of that is just a recommendation for the governor. He's the one that has to make that decision. So during that whole time, we're still praying. We're not hearing anything. That happened in May of 2018. We heard nothing. And, we just kept believing what God said. Then my attorneys were coming back saying, well, it's likely that he's going to say you could probably get out after 30 years. So just prepare yourself. And odds are he's not going to say you can walk out now. And my attorney thought that I was crazy because by this time I was fired up and I said, oh, honey, I rebuke that in the name of Jesus. He said, I'm walking out of here and I'm walking out of here. And so I was just on fire at this time. And, we kept believing it. Me and Jamie did. And months would go by. And then finally he felt the Holy Spirit telling him, to get ready because you're going to go get your wife. You're going to pick up your wife. And it didn't matter what the lawyers had said. He heard what God said. And so he said before he knew it, he was pulling pictures off the wall in his condo. And he sold his car, his dream car. He had a Bentley. He worked in music. He worked very hard, sold that car, sold all his furniture. I didn't know a thing about it until I called him that night on the phone. And he told me that, he was making his pallet on the floor. And I was like, pallet on the floor? Why are you on the floor? And, he told me he got rid of everything because he's moving. God told him to move to Tennessee and get his wife. And, I understood having faith because I'd had a lot of faith. But in that moment, I just started crying wait a minute. Wait, what? Why would you do that? Because you don't really know anything. And he rebuked me. He said, I know what God said. And I was like, okay, all right. So this is what we're doing. So November of 2018, he packed up. He came up here on a whim. And January 7th, I was told that I was getting out of prison. My attorneys came through and they said, you're getting out in August.
Wow. We've got to close, but tell us briefly about the advocacy work you're doing now.
So he and I actually started a nonprofit called the JFAM Foundation, the Foundation for Justice, Freedom, and Mercy. And one of our projects we actually have over here, Pens for the Glitter Project, which was actually a program that I started in Lipscomb class. It's the Grassroots Learning Initiative on Teen Trafficking, Exploitation, and Rape. And that's actually to tell other young kids what trafficking really is. With me, I was trafficked because I didn't understand what it was. I didn't understand what was happening to me was wrong, that it was a violation. And I never would have thought that, it would have happened to a girl like me, but other kids need to know about it. They also need to know what can happen if you make some of these choices that people around you are telling you that you should make. And so right now we're going into facilities, to youth facilities. We're talking to the girls about trafficking, and actually we're helping them to develop into mentors themselves. We plan on putting together a curriculum together with the girls, the youth empowerment specialists, that we can actually put out to other kids in facilities, other kids in schools, and things of that nature. And the pins over here are our youth sex trafficking awareness pins. We're working to get January designated as Youth Sex Trafficking Awareness Month. So anyone who buys a pin tonight, or if you don't want to do it tonight, if you want to do it online, www.jfamfoundation.org. It'll also benefit the youth empowerment specialists and the Glitter Project.
I want to thank you again for your courage and your honoring us through your vulnerability and your sharing of your story tonight. Let's show one more thanks to Cyntoia Brown, author of Free Cyntoia, My Search for Redemption in the American Prison System. You've been listening to Tokens, Public Theology, Human Flourishing, and the Good Life. Interested in helping create more stories like Cyntoia Brown's? Become a financial supporter of Lipscomb University's LIFE program, an initiative that brings transformative higher education to students in the Tennessee prison system. Since 2007, the LIFE program enables incarcerated students like Cyntoia to earn associate's, bachelor's, and master's degrees. For more information, visit tokenshow.com/life. And as one who has had the privilege to participate in that program as a faculty instructor, I could not endorse it more highly. Again, you can find out more at tokenshow.com/life. If you'd like to hear more about the American prison system, then check out our Season 3 episode on the case of Purvis Payne, an inmate for 30 years on Tennessee's death row. Also, check out our Season 1 interview with former Governor Bill Haslam, in which we discussed some of the substantial problems with the criminal justice system. Got feedback? We'd love to hear from you. Email us, text, or attach a voice memo and send to the address podcast@tokenshow.com. Or holler at me online on social media at Lee C. Camp or at Tokens Show. Our thanks to all the stellar team that makes this podcast possible. Executive producer and manager Christy Bragg of Bragg Management. Co-producer Jacob Lewis of Great Feeling Studios. Associate producers Ashley Bain, Leslie Thompson, Tom Anderson, and Brad Perry. Engineer Carrie Harmon. Music beds by Zach and Maggie White and Blue Dot Sessions. And our live sound recording that night by Jeremy Bain. Again, a special thanks to the folks at the Rabbit Room for use of the beautiful North Wind Manor. Thanks for listening, and peace be unto thee. The Tokens Podcast is a production of Tokens Media, LLC, and
Great Feeling Studios.